1987, my father fell in love again. This time, it was with a little gizmo called the Sony digital camera. He loved that big lug of a machine, and it was big because it had a floppy disk drive in it. My dad took that camera everywhere. Dad, why do you love that camera so much? You take it everywhere. Well, you know, honey, I meet a lot of nice people when I'm out running errands. And when they do something nice for me, well, I like to do something nice for them. So I offer to take their picture. And you know what? They almost always say, okay. And then I send it to them on the email. And then they usually call and ask me if I would send them a color copy. I have a nice color printer. So I send them an 8x10 color glossy. And do you know, people really love that. I get all sorts of nice notes. I bet you do, Dad. I bet you do. My mom and Dad lived on a little lake outside of Longview, Texas. And right down the road was the Gregg County Airport. And at the end of that airport runway sat the Airport Cafe. Now, if you've ever been lucky in your life, you've been to a place like the Airport Cafe. They serve two things at the Airport Cafe. They serve kindness and they serve comfort. And I'm talking chicken fried steak, collard greens, and fried okra. Well, my daddy and his digital camera, they were regulars at the Airport Cafe. One day, the head cook and the head waitress told my dad that they were getting married at the Airport Cafe. They weren't very poor, but they weren't very rich. They were pretty poor, in fact, but they wanted a nice wedding. And so they asked my dad if he would be their wedding photographer. He was so tickled. He looked at wedding sites. He read Bride's magazine. He got prepared looking at bridal poses and portraits. By the time of their wedding, my dad was already on oxygen. But he showed up that day in his suit, with his oxygen, with his camera, and with a couple of extra floppy disks. Several years later, my dad died, a proud veteran on Veterans Day, November the 11th, 2002. My parents went to a small little tiny church in the country, and so it was not nearly big enough to host a big service. I found myself the day of my dad's service sitting with my mom in the alcove of the largest funeral home in the city. And I looked out into this huge auditorium and I said, Mom, who are all these people here? This place is packed. You know, I recognize a few faces, honey, but I don't know. I kind of think a lot of them are those people your daddy took all those pictures of. You know, he dragged that camera everywhere. And his obituary, well, you know, it was in the Longview paper. So, you know, and people here in Longview, well, they still read the newspaper. I bet you like that, don't you, honey? Well, that made me smile because I had been in the newspaper business and, well, it was dying too. At the end of the service, we went up to the altar to look at all the flowers. And there was one bouquet that really stood out. Beautiful irises, yellow roses, white gladiolas. My mom pulled out the card and she said, well, how nice. That's from Henry and Mary Ann. Who is that, Mom? Who is that? Oh, you know, they work down at the cafe. Your daddy was their wedding photographer. That night, we all went to the Airport Cafe because those kind people at the Airport Cafe wanted to treat our family and our friends. And the first people out of the door were Henry and Mary Ann to offer their condolences. We're so sorry we missed your daddy's service. But we knew we had a big crowd coming. So we've been here all afternoon cooking. We wanted to make it perfect for you and your family. As I sat there that day at the airport cafe, being comforted by my friends, my family, some incredibly awesome fried food. I thought about my dad and those hundreds of photographs that he had taken. We are so confused about what really creates joy in this world. We think it's about money, stuff, success. It's not about any of those things. It's not about one day when, one day if. Joy is not an if. It's not a when. Joy is a right now. Right now. And my father knew that. And he knew that that right now is when we share our best and most authentic self with the people who flow in and out of our lives every single day. And he expressed that joy through the very simple act of connecting and offering to take someone's photograph. And the day of his service, that simple act was honored. But my dad's second death, that is a far, far place in the future. And that is because my dad will live until there is not one person left on this earth who does not remember him and that little floppy disk of joy that he carried with him everywhere.